Couple big stories out of Washington State today for the second time this week. Just before we jump into that, do just want to remind you guys about the contest that we're having, or more the drawing that we're having over the next couple weeks for any new subscribers. If you are a new subscriber to the channel over the next 2 weeks, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Anybody who does those two things together enters themselves into a drawing for $500 Visa gift card. So hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and you have yourself a chance to win a $500 Visa gift card. Those things really help drive the channel. So if you like the channel and you want to help us build that, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and please don't forget to hit the notification bell. That really helps us to make sure that you're going to get this content when we post a video. So let's jump into the story. We have two stories today. They're connected, coming right out of Washington State. The Post Millennial reports a Washington teacher claims schools need to keep students safe from their Christo-fascist parents. Presumably that's a combination of Christian and fascist, of course. So this is, again, a teacher, and we're getting so many stories of teachers. And before I jump into this, it really is surprising to me, as we are talking so often as conservatives and in conservative circles, and even in moderate circles. There's so much conversation about what's happening in public schools these days, and yet I still regularly am hearing people comment that these things just aren't happening. So it really is important that you are sharing videos like this, or even just other articles or stories with people you're having conversations with. I still regularly encounter people who aren't radical people. They're not rabid leftists or anything like that. They're generally just everyday people who would be very upset about the stuff that we're going to talk about today. But when you bring stuff like this up, they don't live in the political world. They don't follow a ton of politics, but they hear enough about it, and they hear enough about it from the left, that when you start to talk about these things, they just write you off as a right-wing conspiracy theorist, because they've heard the left say these things aren't happening. That's the trope from the left, is these things aren't happening. So you will get moderate people who would be mortified to hear that the terrible things that we all know are happening in the schools are happening, and they would be horrified to hear it. And people just go, these things aren't happening, because the left is out there, despite championing the things that are, they're also saying that they're not. This is one of the tactics from the left that's very common. They'll deny that it's happening and also celebrate it at the same time. It's very common, and you can watch out for that to happen on a regular basis. But they do that because they know it works. People who don't pay attention will hear them deny it, and they'll run with it. And then for the people who do pay attention, they'll celebrate it and say, well, what's wrong with that? So we have more stories here about a teacher in Washington State. And Washington State, one of the bluest places in the country. And the story goes here from from the Post Millennial, a great news outlet, by the way. If you guys, you'll hear me often cite the Post Millennial, and if you guys don't read it on a regular basis, they have a lot of stories, particularly of culture, that that many other outlets don't carry. So here we go. A public school teacher in Washington State complained on Friday that her school district's, quote, guidelines and laws have not helped keep students' information secret from Christo-fascist parents, quote unquote. Parents, keep your school. A post on a forum said, parents, check your school district's policy regarding keeping info about your child secret from you. An account called the Principal's Office posted on Twitter. There are some scary policies out there. School districts should not have the right to keep info about your child from you unless abuse by you is suspected. There, I said it and I mean it. Karen Kelly Love, a teacher for the Auburn School District, responded to the tweet, writing, I cannot disagree with this more. So many students are not safe in this nation from their Christo fascist parents, and our guidelines and laws haven't caught up with this. Ian Pryor, a senior advisor at the American First Legal, took a screenshot of the exchange and posted it to the platform, stating, Teacher in Washington state thinks schools don't go far enough to keep secrets about their students because they are not safe in this nation from their Christo fascist parents. In another thread, a user tweeted, It's absolutely wild to me how few educators have a working knowledge of the history of racism and oppression in this nation. Ian Pryor also followed up after she replied, citing, um, she also believes that 50% of Caucasian female teachers support upholding white supremacy and the patriarchy. She had posted this. It says, because many of them are perpetrators of it. 80% of teachers are white women, and at least statistically, over 50% of them vote for upholding white supremacy and the patriarchy. Love that. So you have this teacher here who has this incredibly insane leftist slant, and she is a teacher um, in a Washington state school district. And of course, we know that these teachers exist. And she's openly advocating that we, uh, sorry, let me back out of this for a second. I want to make sure that I can pull up our next story here. She is openly advocating that we are able to, that schools are able to keep secrets from parents because parents are Christian fascists, and teachers need to protect all children away from their parents. And this is an ongoing theme that we have seen over and over and over again. Not that children, not just for children who come into a school and say, listen, my parent, my kid is, I'm sorry, a kid who comes into the school and admits that their parent is abusing them or something like that. In that case, of course, any adult should be able to report that or whatever, but that's action that's taken, right? And that kid should be dealt with, obviously, according to that. But what is happening in these cases is that teachers are actively taking a role to separate kids from parents. And it's really interesting that story came out yesterday, and I was going to talk about it, and then my recording schedule kind of got separated by some other things that happened. But after I missed the opportunity to record that story, another story came out today that jumped right on top of that and hit that. And so that was one single story. And then, one single story about one single teacher. And you can kind of go with the idea that we've heard so much about teachers who have these crazy left-wing ideologies. Maybe that's one teacher, who knows? But we really do know that there are so many teachers out there with those ideas. But it's really scary to imagine that you might put your kid in a classroom with somebody who has that specific belief. But in case you were concerned that, or in case you had the misunderstanding and thought that maybe that was just one teacher and it's not like the whole system believes that, here's what Washington State has as their whole position. Again, by the Post Millennial today, following up after that, Washington State moves to become the latest sanctuary state for child sex changes. And here's how this goes. Democrats in the Washington State Senate passed a bill Wednesday night that critics say encourages minors to run away from home to receive gender affirming care, quote unquote, and maternity services without parental consent and at taxpayer expense. Senate Bill 5599, sponsored by far left Democratic State Senator Marco Leas, would allow shelters or host homes to provide housing for runaway minors without being required to notify their parents if they have a quote unquote compelling reason to keep the information secret. According to the legislation, a compelling reason means the youth is in the host home or seeking placement in a host home to receive protected health care services. The bill does not require proof of abuse in the household, nor even an allegation of abuse. As a result, merely seeking protected health care services is enough of a reason to keep the runaway's location hidden from parents and clears the way for children between the ages of 13 and 18 to stay in these facilities without their parents' knowledge for an indefinite time while seeking services related to gender dysphoria and gender transitioning. So this is a statewide thing. The state legislature is putting a whole program together to allow kids to run away from their parents and to go to shelters for these kids, or basically foster homes of their own volition to run away from their parents, to protect these children, to protect where they are located, and foster the whole concept and pay for their housing and pay for their transition. This is disgusting. This whole idea that the state will separate these kids from their parents. And this grows more and more insidious. Uh, why the state feels like they should be able to do this, and they should be able to insert themselves uh, between their parents and the kids. It's one thing to be able to look at an abusive situation and say, listen, we need to protect kids from abusive parents. And when I was growing up, there was a big move to do that, right? There was, in the decades prior, the state didn't take as much action for that, and more kids grew up in abusive homes. And of course, prior to that, there were a lot of stories that came out that people would talk about. Their father was a really hard man or something, or particularly their father was an alcoholic, and you would kind of hear that partly because their fathers came out of brutal wars or things like that, or those kinds of things, and you would hear plenty of stories of abuse. And in the 80s and 90s and things like that, they really began to roll out much more aggressive policies that began to deal much more with uh, with protecting children in the home through CPS and things like that from abuse policies. And in many ways, those were good, though the government is never very good at those things. And there were many, many situations of CPS not handling those things well. And you certainly are probably very well aware of those kinds of things. Tons of horror stories about how CPS has badly handled those kinds of things. But it was very good to see how we've been able to protect children from abuse cases that so many went through. But this has gone so far beyond this now to not addressing clear abuse allegations. This is not a situation where somebody is saying, listen, my father is beating me, or even any kind of emotional abuse, anything like that. This is not something where even somebody is saying, listen, I've been punished beyond any reasonable means. I've been grounded for 2 weeks because I dropped something on the floor or anything like that. This isn't even some dispute over excessive punishment or something like that, which of course, would be a little silly about, teenagers being upset over their parents' choice of punishment. This is, aside from dispute or aside from abuse, um, but this is teenagers who are running away from home because despite their own, you know, undeveloped brain, the the state is saying we're not going to allow you to drink legally. We're not going to allow you to take drugs because you don't have a developed brain enough to be able to make those decisions. We're not going to allow you to have sex because we know that you have a undeveloped brain and can't make that decision and can't consent to those things. But what we do believe you should have the right to consent to, because and not even and be able to openly defy your parents and do is cut off your penis. That is something we believe you should be able to do. We believe that at the age of 13, you should be able to defy your parents, run away from home, and have a double mastectomy and mutilate your body, because even though you can't consent to sex at the age of 13, and we know that your brain is not fully enough developed and that you are not mature enough to do that, we know that you are mature enough to make the decision to cut off your sex organs and do that. It's disgusting. It's evil. It's absolutely evil. And there is no excuse for it. And so if you live in Washington State and you have kids, get out. Get out. I would absolutely encourage, in most cases, in most situations, that people should try, when possible, to stick it out and to try to fight for good when they can. Um, if you are if you're in that kind of environment, I would like to try to say that you shouldn't cede the ground and that you should try to fight for the good. But I don't know as though there's any winning in these situations. If you are a parent and you have your 13-year-old is going to be defiant in many ways. Your 13-year-old is going to come home from school with funny ideas from their friends. Why? Because every 13-year-old comes home with funny ideas from their friends. Almost every teenager comes home. I mean, teenagers come home in good households with bad influences, listening to music that doesn't make their parents happy. Some teenagers come home from being raised in good households and they experiment with this or they try these different things and all those kinds of things. And if some teenager who was raised in a good household is convinced by some friends to run away from home and is peer pressured into a situation that they can have their penis chopped off because they can run away from home, they can be housed and the state will pay for it, and that teenager can be convinced of that and can be totally separated from their parents, and they have an argument with their parents and they run off and do it, and their parents can't come put their arm around them and tell them they love them and can't find them. This is disgusting on the state's part. And I really hope that there are some federal court cases that get this shut down. It has not cleared the full legislature yet. We can only hope that it doesn't come all the way through. It has cleared the Senate, but of course we can only hope that it gets appealed all the way up and gets overturned. Of course, we would assume that the Supreme Court, at this case, if it ever got that high, we would assume that the members of the Supreme Court would overturn it. But it would have to get through that process at this point. So, scary things out there, but if you're a parent in Washington State, get out. Get out. And in the meantime, good luck to you. So that's that for today. Again, I want to encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. We're going to continue bringing you this information along with commentary, and I want to encourage you guys to hit the comments down below and let us know what you think about it. And we'll see you again in just a little bit for our next segment today, and we'll see you then. Thanks.